Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll be reading A Man of the People by Chinua Achebe. Give me one moment to pull up the text. Hopefully, you can see it. This is a fictional book, but it gives you a lot of different political education questions to think about. So I want you to consider the current political situation here and abroad. And I want you to ponder as to whether or not these tactics would work. Chapter 1. No one can deny that Chief the Honorable M.A. Nanga, MP, was the most approachable politician in the country. Whether you asked in the city or in his home village, Anada would tell you he was a man of the people. I have to admit this from the onset, or else the story I'm going to tell will make no sense. That afternoon, he was due to address the staff and students of the Anada Grammar School, where I was teaching at the time. But, as usual, in those highly political times, the villagers moved in and virtually took over. The assembly hall must have carried well over thrice its capacity. Many villagers sat on the floor, right up to the foot of the dais. I took one look and decided it was just as well we had to stay outside, at least for the moment. 5 or 6 dancing groups were performing at different points in the compound. The popular Ego Women's Party wore a new uniform of expensive Accra cloth. In spite of the din, you could still hear as clear as a bird the high powered voice of their soloist, whom they admiringly nicknamed Gramophone. Personally, I don't care too much for our women's dancing, but you just had to listen whenever Gramophone sang. She was now praising Micah's handsomeness, which she likened to the perfect sculpted beauty of a carved eagle, and his popularity, which would be the envy of the proverbial traveler to distant places, but who must not cultivate enmity on his route. Micah was, of course, Chief the Honorable M.A. Nanga MP. The arrival of the members of the Hunters Guild in full regalia caused a great stir. Even Gramophone stopped, at least for a while. These people never came out except at the funeral of one of their number or during some very special and outstanding event. I could not remember when I last saw them. They wielded their loaded guns as though they were playthings. Now and again, 2 of them would meet in warrior's salute and knock the barrel of their guns together from left to right and again from right to left. Mothers grabbed their children and hurriedly dragged them away. Occasionally, a hunter would take aim at a distant palm branch and break its midrib. The crowd applauded, but there were very few such shots. Most of the hunters reserved their precious powder to greet the minister's arrival. The price of gunpowder, like everything else, having doubled again and again in the 4 years since this government took control. As I stood in one corner of that vast tumult, waiting for the arrival of the minister, I felt intense bitterness welling up in my mouth. Here were silly, ignorant villagers dancing themselves to lame and waiting to blow off their gunpowder in honor of one of those who had started the country off down the slopes of inflation. I wished for a miracle, for a voice of thunder to hush the ridiculous festival and tell the poor, contemptible people one or two truths. But of course, it would be quite useless. They were not only ignorant but cynical. Tell them that this man had used his position to enrich himself, and they would ask you, as my own father did, if you thought that a sensible man would spit out the juicy morsel that good fortune placed in his mouth. I had not always disliked Mr. Nanga. 16 years or so ago, he had been my teacher in Standard 3, and I, something like his favorite pupil. I remember him then as a popular, young, and handsome teacher, most impressive in his uniform as scoutmaster. There was on one of the walls of the school a painting of a faultlessly handsome scoutmaster wearing an impeccable uniform. I am not sure that the art teacher who painted the picture had Mr. Nanga in mind. There was no facial resemblance. Still, we called it the picture of Mr. Nanga. It was enough that they were both handsome and that they were both impressive scoutmasters. This picture stood with arms folded across his chest and raised right foot resting neatly and lightly on the perfectly cut tree stump. Big red hibiscus flowers decorated the four corners of the frame, and below were inscribed the memorable words, "Not what I have, but what I do is my kingdom." That was in 1948. I want to say greetings to the Forecast and Bwana Haguziki, who says this is one of his favorite books. Thank you, Bwana Haguziki, for making this particular recommendation to us. We'll continue in a moment. Nanga must have gone into politics soon after and then won a seat in parliament. It was easy in those days before we knew its cash price. I used to read about him in the papers some years later and even took something like pride in him. At that time, I had just entered the university and was very active in the students' branch of the People's Organization Party. Then, in 1960, something disgraceful happened in the party and I was completely disillusioned. At that time, Mr. Nanga was an unknown backbencher in the governing POP. A general election was imminent. The POP was riding high in the country and there was no fear of its being returned. Its opponent, the Progressive Alliance Party, was weak and disorganized. Then came the slump in the international coffee market. Overnight, or so it seemed to us, the government had a dangerous financial crisis on its hands. Coffee was the prop of our economy, just as coffee farmers were the bulwark of the POP. The Minister of Finance at the time was a first rate economist with a PhD in public finance. He presented to the cabinet a complete plan for dealing with the situation, but the prime minister said no to the plan. He was not going to risk losing the election by cutting down the price paid to coffee planters at that critical moment. The National Bank should be instructed to print 15 million pounds. Two-thirds of the cabinet supported the minister. The next morning, the prime minister sacked them, and in the evening, he broadcast to the nation. He said the dismissed ministers were conspirators and traitors who had teamed up with foreign saboteurs to destroy the new nation. I remember this broadcast very well. Of course, No one knew the truth at that time. The newspapers and the radio carried the prime minister's version of the story. We were very indignant. Our students' union met in emergency session and passed a vote of confidence in the leader and called for a detention law to deal with the miscreants. The whole country was behind the leader. Protest marches and demonstrations were staged up and down the land. It was at this point that I first noticed a new, dangerous, and sinister note in the universal outcry. The Daily Chronicle, an official organ of the POP, had pointed out in an editorial that the miscreant gang, as the dismissed ministers were now called, were all university people and highly educated professional men. I have preserved a cutting of that editorial. Now, let us now and for all time extract our body politic as a dentist extracts a stinking tooth, all those decadent stooges versed in textbook economics and aping with white man's mannerisms and way of speaking. We are proud to be Africans. Our true leaders are not those intoxicated with their Oxford, Cambridge, or Harvard degrees, but those who speak the language of the people. Away with the damnable and expensive university education, which only alienates an African from his rich and ancient culture and puts him above his people. Does that sound like anyone we know to this very day? Printing money to make up for an economic shortfall and rejecting intellectual discourse and higher education because that's not who we are? This cry was taken up on all sides. Our newspapers pointed out that even in Britain, where the miscreant gang got the so-called education, a man need not be an economist to be a chancellor of the exchequer or a doctor to be minister of health. What mattered was loyalty to the party. I wonder where Trump got his ideas from. I was in the public gallery the day the prime minister received his overwhelming vote of confidence. And that was the day the truth finally came out. Only no one was listening. I remember the grief-stricken figure of the dismissed minister of France as he led his team into the chamber and was loudly booed by members of the public. That week, his car had been destroyed by angry mobs and his house stoned. Another dismissed minister had been pulled out of his car, beaten insensibly, and dragged along the road for 50 yards, then hand tied and foot, then hand and foot, then tied hand and foot, gagged and left by the side of the road. He was still in the orthopedic hospital when the House met. That was my first and last visit to Parliament. It was also the only time I had set eyes on Mr. Nanga again since he taught me in 1948. The Prime Minister spoke for 3 hours and his every other word was applauded. He was called the tiger, the lion, the one and only, the sky, the ocean, and many other names of praise. He said that the miscreant gang had been caught red-handed in their nefarious plot to overthrow the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, with the help of enemies abroad. They deserve to be hanged, shouted Mr. Nanga from the back benches. This interruption was so loud and clear that it appeared later under his own name in the Hansard. Throughout the session, he led the pack of backbench hounds straining their leash to get at their victims. If anyone cared to sum up Mr. Nanga's interruptions, they would have made a good hour's continuous yelp. Perspiration poured down his face as he sprang up to interrupt or sat back to share in the derisive laughter of the hungry hyena. When the prime minister said that he had been stabbed in the back by the very ingrates he had pulled out of oblivion, some members were in tears. They have bitten the finger with which their mother fed them, said Mr. Nanga. This too was entered into the Hansard, a copy of which I have before me. It is impossible, however, to convey in cold print the electric atmosphere of the day. I cannot now recall exactly what my feelings were at that point. I suppose I thought the whole performance rather peculiar. You must remember that at that point, no one had any reason to think there might be another side to the story. The prime minister was still talking. Then he made the now famous, or infamous, solemn declaration. From today, we must watch and guard our own hard-won freedom jealously. Never again must we entrust our destiny and the destiny of Africa to the hybrid class of Western educated and snobbish intellectuals who will not hesitate to sell their mothers for a mess of pottage. Isn't that interesting? Don't we have some similar sentiments to this very day with regard to how we see those that have been educated? But we need to be laser focused on the fact that those that have been educated in a certain way. But if they have an African centeredness about them, they can be tools that we use and insert in very strategic places. Mr. Nanga pronounced the death sentence at least twice more, but this was not recorded. No doubt because his voice lost in the general commotion. His voice was lost in the general commotion. I remember the figure of Dr. McKindy, the ex-minister of finance, as he got up to speak. Tall, calm, sorrowful, and superior. I strained my ears to catch his words. The entire house, including the prime minister, tried to shout him down. It was the most unedifying spectacle. The speaker broke his mallet, ostensibly trying to maintain order, but you could see he was enjoying the commotion. The public gallery yelled down his abuses: traitor, coward, doctor of fork your mother. This last was contributed from the gallery by the editor of the Daily Chronicle, who sat close to me. Encouraged, no doubt, with the volume of laughter this piece of witticism had earned him in the gallery, he proceeded the next morning to print it in his paper. The spelling was his. Although Dr. McKindy read his speech, which was clearly prepared, the Hansard later carried a garbled version which made no sense at all. It said not a word about the plan to mint 15 million pounds, which was perhaps to be expected. But why put into Dr. McKindy's mouth words that he could not have spoken? In short, the Hansard boys wrote a completely new speech suitable to the boastful villain the ex-minister had become. For instance, they made him say he was a brilliant economist whose reputation was universally acclaimed in Europe. When I read this, I was in tears, and I don't cry all that easily. The reason I have gone into that shameful episode in such detail is to establish the fact that I had no reason to be enthusiastic about Chief the Honorable M.A. Nanga, who, seeing the empty ministerial seats, had yapped and snarled so shamelessly for the meaty prize. The proprietor and principal of the school was a thin, wiry fellow named Jonathan Nwege. He was very active in politics in the local council level, at the local council level, and was always grumbling because his services to the POP had not been rewarded with the usual prize appointment to some public corporation or other. But though disgruntled, he had not despaired, as witness his elaborate arrangements for the present reception. Perhaps he was hoping for something of the proposed new corporation, which would take over the disposal of the government's unserviceable property, like old mattresses, chairs, electric fans, disused typewriters, and other junk, which at present was auctioned off by civil servants. I hope he gets appointed. That it would have the merit of removing him from the school now and again. He insisted that the students should mount a guard of honor stretching from the main road to the school door, and the teachers were to stand in a line at the end of the student queue to be introduced. Mr. Nwege, who regularly read such literature as toasts, how to propose them, was very meticulous about this kind of thing. I had objected vehemently to this standing like school children at our staff meeting, thinking to rouse the other teachers. But the teachers in that school were all dead from the neck up. My friend and colleague Andrew Kadibi found it impossible to side with me because he and the minister came from the same village. Primitive loyalty is what I call it. As soon as the minister's Cadillac arrived at the head of a long motorcade, the hunters dashed this way and that way and let off their last shots, throwing their guns about with frightening freedom. The dancers capered and stamped, filling the dry season air with dust. Not even Gramophone's voice could now be heard over the tumult. The minister stepped out wearing a damask and gold chains and acknowledging cheers with his ever present fan of animal skin, which they said fanned away all evil designs and shafts of malevolence thrown at him by the wicked. The man was still as handsome and youthful looking as ever. There was no doubt about that. The proprietor was now introducing him to the teachers, beginning with the senior tutor at the head of the line. Although I had not had time to scrutinize the senior tutor's person, I had no doubt he had traces of snuff, as usual, in his nostrils. The minister had a jovial word for everyone. You could never think, looking at him now, that his smile was anything but genuine. It seemed bloody minded to be skeptical. Now it was my turn. I held out my hand somewhat stiffly. I did not have the slightest fear that he might remember me and had no intention of reminding him. Our hands met. I looked him straight in the face. The smile slowly creased up into the lines of thought. He waved his left hand impatiently to silence the loquacious proprietor who had begun the parrot formula he had repeated at least 15 times so far. I have the honor, sir, to introduce. That's right, said the minister, not to anyone in particular, but some old mechanism of memory inside his head. You are Odili. Yes, sir. Before the words were out of my mouth, he had thrown his arms around me, smothering me in his voluminous damask. You have a wonderful memory, I said. It's at least 15 years. He had now partly released me, although his left hand was resting on my shoulder. He turned slightly at the proprietor and announced proudly, I taught him in Standard 3, I said. That's right, he shouted. If he had just found his as if he had just found his long lost son, he could not have been more excited. He is one of the pillars of this school, said the proprietor, catching the infection and saying the first good word about me since I had joined his school. Odili the Great, the minister boyishly and still out of breath, said, Where have you been all this time? I told him I had been to university and had been teaching for the last 18 months. Good boy, he said. I knew he would go to a university. I used to tell the other boys in my class that Odili will one day be a great man, and they will be answering him, Sir, sir. Why did you not tell me when you left the university? That's very bad of you, you know. Well, I said happily, I'm ashamed to admit, I know how busy a minister. Busy? Nonsense. Don't you know that minister means servant? Busy or no busy, he must see his master. Everybody around laughed and applauded. He slapped me again on the back and said I must not fail to see him at the end of the reception. If you fail, I will send my orderly to arrest you. I became a hero in the eyes of the crowd. I was dazed. Everything around me became suddenly unreal. The voices receded into a vague border zone. I knew I ought to be angry with myself, but I wasn't. I found myself wondering whether, perhaps, I had been applying to politics stringent standards that didn't belong to it. When I came back to the immediate present, I heard the minister saying to another teacher, That is very good. Sometimes I used to regret ever leaving the teaching field. Although I am a minister today, I can swear to God that I am not as happy as when I was a teacher. My memory is naturally good. That day, it was perfect. I don't know how it happened, but I can recall every word the minister said on that occasion. I can repeat the entire speech he made later. True to God who made me, he insisted. I used to regret it. Teaching is a very noble profession. At this point, everybody just collapsed with laughter, not least of all the honorable minister himself, nor me for that matter. The man's assurance was simply unbelievable. He only he could make such a risky joke or whatever he thought he was making at that time when teachers all over the country were in an ugly, rebellious mood. When the laughter died down, he put on a more serious face and confided in us. You can rest assured that those of us in the cabinet who were once teachers are in full sympathy with you. Once a teacher, always a teacher, said the senior tutor. adjusting the sleeves of his faded box-bottom robes. Hear, hear, I said. I like to think that I meant to be sarcastic. The man's charisma had to be felt to be believed. If I were superstitious, I would say he made a really potent charm of the variety called sweet face. Changing the subject slightly, the minister said, only teachers can make this excellent arrangement. Then turning to the newspaper correspondent in his party, he said, it is a mammoth crowd. The journalist whipped out his notebook and began to write. It is an unprecedented crowd in the annals of Annata, said Mr. Nwege. James, did you hear that? The minister asked the journalist. No, sir. What is it? This gentleman says it is the most unprecedented crowd in the annals of Annata. I said. This time I clearly meant my tongue to be in cheek. What is this gentleman's name? Mr. Nwege called his name and spelled it and gave full title of the principal and proprietor of Annata Grammar School. Then he turned to the minister in an effort to pinpoint responsibility for the big crowds. I had to visit every section of the village personally to tell them of to say of the minister's visit. We had now entered the assembly hall, and the minister and his party were conducted to their seats in the dais. The crowd raised a deafening shout of welcome. He waved his fan to the different parts of the hall. Then he turned to Mr. Nwege and said, Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. A huge, tough-looking member of the minister's entourage who stood with us at the back of the dais raised his voice and said, You see, we tin I de talk. Many minister fit answer, sir, to any Tom, Dick, and Harry. Way senior them for age. I ask you how many? Everyone in the dais agreed that the minister was quite exceptional in this respect, a man of high position who still gave age the respect due to it. No doubt, it was a measure of my changed, or shall we say, changing, attitude toward the minister that I found myself feeling a little embarrassed on his account for these fulsome praises flung over at his face. Minister or no minister, he said, a man who is my senior must still be my senior. Other ministers and other people may do otherwise, but my motto is do the right and shame the devil. Somehow, I found myself admiring the man for his lack of modesty. For what is modesty but inverted pride? We all think we are first-class people. Modesty forbids us from saying so ourselves, though. Presumably from wanting to hear it from others. Perhaps it was their impatience with this kind of hypocrisy that made men like Nanga successful politicians, while starry-eyed idealists strove vaingloriously to bring into politics niceties and delicate refinements that belonged elsewhere. While I thought about all this, perhaps not in these exact terms, the fulsome praises flowed all around the dais. Mr. Nwege took the opportunity to mount his old hobby horse. The minister's excellent behavior, he said, was due to the same education he had received when education was education. Yes, said the minister. I used to tell them that Standard 6 in those days was more than Cambridge is today. Cambridge? Asked Mr. Nuege, who, like the minister, had the good old Standard 6. Cambridge? Who dashed frog coat? You mean it is equal to BA today, if not more? With due apologies, said the minister, turning in my direction. Not at all, sir, I replied with equal good humor. I am applying for a postgraduate scholarship to bring myself up to Mr. Nuege's expectation. I remember that at that point, the beautiful girl in the minister's party turned round on her chair to look at me. My eyes met her eyes, and she quickly turned around again. I think the minister noticed it. My private secretary has BA from Oxford, he said. He should have come with me on this tour, but I had some office work for him to do. By the way, Odili, I think you are wasting your talent here. I want you to come to the capital and take up a strategic post in the civil service. We shouldn't leave everything to the Highland tribes. My secretary is from there. Our people must press for their fair share in their national cake. The hackneyed phrase, national cake, was getting some of us for the first time, and so it was greeted with applause. Owner of book, cried one admirer, assigning in those three brief words ownership of the white man's language to the honorable minister, who turned around and beamed on the speaker. That was when my friend, Andrew Kadibi, committed the unpardonable indiscretion of calling the minister the nickname he had worn as teacher, MA minus opportunity. It was particularly bad because Andrew and the minister were from the same village. The look he gave Andrew then reminded me of that other Nanga who had led the pack of hounds 4 years ago. Sorry, sir, said Andrew pitiably. Sorry for what? Snarled the minister. Don't mind the stupid boy, sir, said Mr. Nuege, greatly upset. This is what we were saying before. I think we better begin, said the minister, still frowning. Although Mr. Nuege had begun by saying that the distinguished guest needed no introduction, he had gone all the same to talk for well over 20 minutes, largely in praise of himself and all he had done for the party in Annada and environs. The crowd became steadily more restive, especially when they noticed that the minister was looking at his watch. Loud grumbles began to reach the dais from the audience. Then, clear voices telling Nwege to sit down and let the man they came to hear talk. Nwege ignored all these warning signs, a more insensitive man than you ever saw. Finally, one of the tough young men of the village stood up 10 feet or so away and shouted, It is enough, or I shall push you down and take 3 pence. This did the trick. The laughter that went up must have been heard a mile away. Mr. Nwege's concluding remarks were completely lost. In fact, it was not until the minister rose to his feet that the laughter stopped. The story had it many years ago when Mr. Nwege was a poor, hungry elementary school teacher. That is, before he built his own grammar school and became rich. but apparently still hungry. He had an old rickety bicycle of the kind the villagers gave the anopoetic name of Ankajikala. Needless to say, the brakes were very faulty. One day, as he was cascading down a steep slope that led to a narrow bridge at the bottom of the hill, he saw a lorry, an unusual phenomenon in those days, coming down the opposite slope. It looked like a head on meeting on the bridge. In his extremity, Mr. Nwege had raised his voice and cried to passing pedestrians, "In the name of God, push me down." Apparently, nobody did. And so he added an inducement, "Push me down, and 3 pence is yours." From that day, "Push me down and take my 3 pence" became a popular Anada joke. The minister's speech sounded spontaneous and was most effective. There was no election at hand, he said amid laughter. He had not come to beg for their votes. It was just a family reunion, pure and simple. He would have preferred not to speak to his own kinsmen in English, which was, after all, a foreign language, but he had learned from experience that speeches made in vernacular were liable to be distorted and misquoted in the press. Also, there were some strangers in the audience who did not speak our own tongue, and he did not wish to exclude them. They were all citizens of our great country, whether they came from the highlands or the lowlands. And he went on and on. The stranger he had in mind, I think, was Miss Eleanor John, an influential party woman from the coast who had come in the minister's party. She was heavily painted and perfumed, and although no longer young, seemed more than able to hold her own, if it came to that. She sat on the minister's left, smoking and fanning herself. Next to her sat the beautiful young girl I have talked about. I didn't catch the two of them exchanging any words or even looks. I wondered what such a girl was doing in that tough crowd. It looked as though they had stopped by some convenient convent on their way and offered to give her a lift to the next one. At the end of his speech, the minister and his party were invited to the proprietor's lounge, as Mr. Nwege called his square cement block house. Outside, the dancers had all come alive again, and the hunters, their last powder gone, were tamely waiting for the promised palm wine. The minister danced a few dignified steps to the music of each group and stuck red pound notes on the perspiring faces of the best dancers. One group alone he gave away £5. The same man who had drawn our attention to the minister's humility was now pointing out yet another quality. I looked at him closely for the first time and noticed that he had one bad eye, what we call a cowrie shell eye. You see, Howie Dewey, as to say, money be a sansan, he was saying. People way they jealous the money government they pay, minister no sabe, no say be him the one chop na so throw away. Later, in the proprietor's lodge, I said to the minister, "You must have spent a fortune today." He smiled at the glass of cold beer in his hand and said, "You call this spent? You never see something, my brother. I know to keep a ninny for myself, nah, so throw away. If some person come to you and say, I want make you minister, make you run like blazes come on. Not true word I tell you, to God who made me. He showed the tip of his tongue to the sky to confirm his oath. Minister the sweet, for I but too much katara ka di for inside. Believe me yours sincerely. Big man, big palaver, said the one-eyed man. It was left to Josiah, owner of the nearby shop and bar, to sound a discordant if jovial note. Me one, said he said. I know cuckoo mind, the kataka, katakata, way day for inside. Make you put minister money for my hand on all the wahala on top. I no mind at all. Everyone laughed. Then Mrs. John said, no, be so my friend. When you experience rich man's trouble, you no fit talk like that again. My people get one proverb. They say that when the poor man done see him with him own eye, how to make big man ego beg, make e carry him poverty de go GG. They said this woman was a very close friend of the minister's, and her proprietary air would seem to confirm it. And the fact that she had come all the way from Pacoma, 350 miles away. I knew her from the newspapers. She was a member of the Liberty Commission, one of the statutory boards within the minister's portfolio. Her massive coral beads, worth hundreds of pounds, according to the whisper circulating in the room while she talked. She was the merchant princess par excellence. Poor beginning, an orphan, I believe, no school education, plenty of good looks, and an iron determination, both of which she put to good account, beginning as a street hawker, rising to a small trader, and then to a big one. At present, they said, she presided over the entire trade in imported secondhand clothing worth hundreds of thousands. Greetings, Anthony McPhail and Sister Raw. I'm so glad you're here. I apologize, you guys, for not keeping up with the comments tonight. I have a different setup. Happy birthday, Anthony McPhail. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bwana Haguziki says, do I see how they turning the politician into the God, giving them a little bit of money? Absolutely. And they do that to this very day. If I didn't say it already, greetings, Sister Raw and the elders listening with you. Thank you so much for tuning in. All right, continuing. I edged quietly toward the journalist, who seemed to know everyone in the party, and whispered in his ear, who is the young lady? Ah, he said, leaving his mouth wide open for a while as a danger signal. Make you no more go near Amo. My hand no D for inside. I told him I wasn't going near Amo. I merely asked who she was. The minister no D introduce to anybody. So I think say not im girlfriend or im cousin. Then he confided, I done look 'em so tay I tired. No, I no go tell you lie. Girls for this una part say be fine. Oh, God Almighty. I had also noticed that the minister had skipped her when he had introduced his party to the teachers. I know it sounded silly, but I began to wonder what had happened to Mrs. Nanga of the scoutmastering days. They were newly married then. I remember her particularly because she was the very first woman I knew to wear a white lady's helmet, with which in our ignorance we called helmet, and which in those days was the very acme of sophistication. So this introduction we meet this politician who is a big man on campus. He has come up through the ranks from being a school teacher to being the president, MP and MA, chief, the honorable. He is flashing his money and his charm to the people. They are loyal to him. They have taken an anti intellectualism stance toward the politicians that they want in power because these intellectuals were telling them that they should not just go around printing money, but that they should have fiscal policy that makes more sense. And they rejected that as the white man's way. All of these different nuanced things have happened in chapter 1. We're going to read chapter 2. Let me see. I think we're going to read chapter 2. Yeah, we're going to read chapter 2 and then we'll be done for the evening. Chapter 2. A common saying in the country was, after independence, was that it didn't matter what you knew, but who you knew. And believe me, it was no idle talk. For a person like me, who simply couldn't stoop to lick any big man's boots, it created a big problem. In fact, one reason why I took this teaching job in a bush private school instead of the smart civil service job in the city with the car, free housing, and everything else was to give myself a certain amount of autonomy. So, just like today, if you get a government job, you're expected to be loyal to that government and you're expected to give up many aspects of your opinion when it comes to criticizing that government. So when I told the minister that I had applied for a scholarship to do a postgraduate certificate of education in London, it did not even cross my mind to enlist his help. I think it is important to stress this point. I had had scholarships both to secondary school and to the university without any godfather's help, but purely on my own merit. And in case it wasn't too important whether I was the postgraduate course or not, as far as I was concerned, the important thing was going to be the opportunity of visiting Europe, which in and of itself must be big education. My friend Andrew Kadibi, who did the same course the previous year, seemed to have a big kick out of it. I don't mean the white girls. You can have those out here nowadays, but quite small things. I remember him saying, for instance, that the greatest delight of his entire visit to Britain was when for the first time in his 27 years, a white man, a taxi driver, I think, carried his suitcase and said, "Sir," to him. He was so thrilled, he tipped the man 10 shillings. We laughed a lot about it, but I could so easily see it happen. But much as I wanted to go to Europe, I wasn't going to sell my soul for it or beg anyone for help. It was the minister himself who came back to the postgraduate question at the end of his reception without any prompting whatsoever from me. As a matter of fact, I tried hard to avoid catching his attention again, and the proposals he made didn't seem to me to be offensive in any way. He invited me to come and spend my holidays with him in the capital. And while I was there, he would try and find out from his cabinet colleague, the Minister of Overseas Training, whether there was anything doing. If you come as soon as you close, he said, you can stay in my guest room with everything complete: bedroom, parlor, bathroom, latrine, everything self contained. You can live by yourself and do anything you like there. It's all yours. Make you no min am sha'a, said Miss John to me. I can see say you na good boy. Make you no gree am spoil you. Me, I know thee for this bedroom and bathroom business. Oh, as you see, this man so now wicked soul. If he tell you stand, make you run. Everybody laughed. Eleanor, why you want to disgrace me and spoil my name so for public, not for nothing sake? What did I do to you? Everybody here say I'm not good Christian. No be so, James. Ah, na so na, sir, replied the journalist happily. In spite of all this joking, the minister's invitation was serious and firm. He said it was important I came out at once, as he was planning to go to the United States in about 2 months. They're going to give me a doctorate degree, he announced proudly. Doctor of Laws, LLD. That's great, I said. Congratulations. Thank you, my brother. So the minister will come, Chief the Honorable Dr. M.A. Nanga, intoned the journalist. A whole second ahead of my own thoughts on the matter. We all cheered the impressive address and its future owner. You know, see, say, the title fit my name, Pim, said the minister with boyish excitement. And we all said yes, it suited him perfectly. But the man, way I like him named Pasna, Chief the Honorable Alhaji Dr. Mongo Singo MP, said the minister, somewhat wistfully. Him own good too, admitted the incomparable journalist. But he no pass your own, sir. Chief the Honorable Dr. M.A. Nanga, MPLLD. Nawa, nothing fit pass him. What about Chief Doctor's missus? I threw in mischievously. That no one sweet for mouth, said Minister E. No catch. Wintin wrong with them, asked Mrs. John, because now woman get them e no go sweet for mouth. I done talk say now for the election time. Woman get the get quality for this our country. No be so, madam, said the journalist. You no see how the title rough like sandpaper for mouth. Dr. Chief Mrs. E no catch at all. Before the minister left, He made sure I took down his residential address in the capital. I felt Mr. Nuege's malevolent eyes boring into me as I wrote it down, and hardly were the farewells out of his mouth before he turned to me and asked sneeringly if I was still of the opinion that it was unnecessary to be introduced to the minister. What I objected was to standing in a line like school children, I said, somewhat embarrassed. In any case, I didn't need to be introduced. We already knew each other. You can thank your stars that I am not a wicked man, he continued, as though I had said nothing. Otherwise, I would have told him. Why don't you run after him now? I asked. He can't have gone very far. With that, I walked away from the obsequious old fool. But when I came to think of the events of that day, I had to admit that Mr. Nuege had not fair returns for all his trouble. I don't think the minister gave him as much as a second to raise any of his own problems. And it was uncharitable, I thought, for him to have joined in so loudly as he had done in the push me down laughter. For the sake of appearances, at least, he should have kept a straight face. It was clear the great man did not easily forgive those who took up part of his time to make their own speeches. He ostentatiously ignored Mr. Nuege for the rest of the day. Poor man. He had probably lost the chance of getting on that new corporation for the disposal of dilapidated government wares, with which he was no doubt hoping to replace the even more worn out equipment in his school. So, although it was unreasonable for him to have turned his anger on me, there was no doubt that he had cause to be angry. Actually, his teachers had let him down badly after that afternoon. Apart from myself, there was that MA minus opportunity incident, which for some obscure reason seemed to have annoyed the minister even more than Mr. Nuege's long speech. At least he contained the latter annoyance with laughter. And to crown Mr. Nuege's discomfitures, his senior tutor, a man in his 60s, had sallied out of the lodge with one bottle of beer under each armpit to the amusement of everyone except Mr. Nuege, who had clearly not gone out of his way to buy beer at its present impossible price for members of his staff to take home. The senior tutor, by the way, was a jolly old rogue who could get away with anything, if need be, by playing the buffoon. He was a great frequenter of Josiah's bar across the road. He had a fine sense of humor, like when he asked why so many young people traveled to Britain to be called to the bar when he could call them all to Josiah's bar. I was lighting my Tilly lamp later that evening when someone knocked on my door. Come in if you are looking good, I said. Is Odili in? Asked an unnatural, high pitched voice. Come in, fool, I said. It was a silly joke. Andrew and I never tired of playing on each other. The idea was to sound like a girl and so to send the other's blood pressure up. How the how the go digo? I asked. Bo son of man done tire. Did you find out about that girl? I asked. Why not so girl? Girl, girl, girl. Then full of your mouth. Wheaton. So person no fit talk any serious talk with you I never see. Okay, Mr. Gentleman, I said, pumping up the lamp. Any person we first mention about girl again for this room, make him tongue cut. How is the weather? He laughed. At that point, my houseboy, a 15-year-old rogue named Peter, came in to ask what he should cook for supper. You no hear the news for 3 o'clock? I asked, feigning great seriousness. Sir, government done passed new laws saying now ya only 2 times a day person go the chop now. For morning and for afternoon. Finish. He laughed. That is next to impossibility, he said. Peter liked his words long. He had his Standard 6 certification, which 2 or 3 years before could have got him a job as a messenger in an office or even a teacher in an elementary school. But today, because there aren't any jobs for his kind of person anymore, and he was lucky to be a sort of housekeeper to me for £1 a month, including, of course, free boarding and lodging. He spent most of his spare time reading, although his favorite literature is of a very dubious kind. I once found him reading a strange book he had just received from India. I think it was called How to Solve the Fair Sex, and had cost him no less than 10 shillings, excluding postage from New Delhi. I had roundly rebuked him. I couldn't think of what to eat, so I told him to go and roast me some yams. Roast yams? At night? Screamed Andrew. If you knock at my door in the middle of the night, I shan't wake up. It was a crude reference to the night I had a violent stomach ache after eating a half dozen roasted corn. I had been so scared, I had gone and called Andrew up to take me to the hospital in his ancient car. What do you suggest I eat then? I asked him. Am I your wife? Don't you see all the girls waiting for husbands? Don't fear. I have my own eyes on one right now. True. Give me Tori. Who is she? What about the poem? The shame, I said, and we recited together a poem one of our old acquaintances had composed for his wedding invitation card, which said, It's time to spread the news abroad that we are well prepared to tie ourselves with silvery cord of sweet conjugal bond. Look at this small pickin', said Andrew in pretended anger to Peter, who joined in our laughter. How dare you laugh with your elders? Sorry, sir, said Peter, frowning comically. What do you think I should eat, Peter? I asked. Anything, master. Talk. Like jollof rice, sir? I knew whatever you allowed him to say in this matter, he invariably came up with jollof rice, his favorite dish. Okay, I said, 1 cup of rice, not 1.5, not 1.25. Yes, sir, he said, and he went away happily. I knew he would cook at least 2 cups. Who is she? I said. Who? The girl with the minister. His girlfriend. I see. Actually, it's more than that. He's planning to marry her according to native law and custom. Apparently, his missus is too bush for his present position, so he wants a bright new parlor wife to play hostess at his parties. Too bad. Who told you all this? Somebody. Too bad. Without knowing anything whatever about the girl, I feel she deserves somebody to be somebody's first wife, not an old man's mistress. Anyway, it's none of my business. He sent her to a woman's training college, said Andrew. So he's been planning it for a few years at least. I feel sorry for her. That man has no conscience. I said nothing. Imagine such a beautiful young thing wasting herself on an empty headed ass. I so enjoyed wounding his pride. Did you see how wild he looked? Yes, I said, and you hit him hard. Actually I was amused how Andrew was desperately trying to convince himself and me that he had gone to the reception with the avowed intention to deflate the empty-headed countryman. He seemed to be forgetting in a hurry that he had earlier refused to support me at the staff meeting when I had objected to Mr. Inwege's stupid plans. Just think of such a cultureless man going abroad and calling himself Minister of Culture. Ridiculous. This is why the outside world laughs at us. This is true, I said, but the outside world isn't all that important, is it? In any case, people like Chief Nanga don't care two hoots about the outside world. He is concerned with the inside world and how to retain his hold on his constituency there. He is adept, you must admit. Anyway, as he told us today, Churchill never passed his school certificate. I see the offer of free lodging is already having its effect on you. Bwana Haguziki says, Achibi would think nothing changed this story reminds me of Bohemian politics so much. Yeah, I can see how this is actually all modern day politics. I see it here in America. I see it in the Caribbean. I see it on the continent. Things have changed, but not that much. I began to laugh, and Andrew joined in. You could tell at a glance that he knew me in a way that Mr. Nwege didn't. It was one thing to tease me for accepting the minister's offer of accommodation, but I just didn't want anybody to think that Odili Samalu was capable of stooping to obtain a scholarship in any underhanded way. In the words of my boy Peter, it was next to impossibility. Andrew knew, of course, that I had long been planning to go to the capital, and he knew about Elsie. Well, Elsie, where does one begin to write about her? The difficulty in writing this kind of story is that the writer is armed with all kinds of hindsight, which he didn't have when the original events were happening. When he introduces a character like Elsie, for instance, he already has had at the back of his mind a total picture of her entrance, her act, and her exit. And this tends to color even the first words he writes. I can only hope that being aware of this danger, I have successfully kept it at bay as far as humanly possible. I shall try not to jump ahead of my story. Elsie was, and for that matter, still is, the only girl I met and slept with the same day. In fact, within an hour. I know that fast records do exist, and I am not entering this one for that purpose, nor am I trying to prejudice anyone against Elsie. I only put it down because that was the way it happened. It was during my last term at university, and having, as usual, put off my revision until the last moment, I was having a rough time. But one evening, there was a party organized by the Students' Christian Movement. And I decided, in spite of my arrears of work, to attend and give my brain time to cool off. I am not usually lucky, but that evening I was. I saw Elsie standing in a group with other student nurses and made straight for her. She turned out to be the most vivacious girl newly come to the nursing school. We danced twice. Then I suggested we take a walk away from the noisy high life band, and she readily agreed. If I had been left to my own devices, nothing might have happened that day. But no doubt, without meaning to, Elsie took a hand to in the matter. She said she was thirsty, and I took her to my rooms for a drink of water. She was one of those girls who sends out loud cries in the heat of a thing. It happened again each time, but that first day it was rather funny because she kept calling, Ralph, darling. I remember wondering, why Ralph? It was not until weeks later that I got to know that she was engaged to some daft fellow named Ralph, a medical student at Edinburgh. The funny part of it was that my next door neighbor, an English honors student, and easily the most ruthless and unprincipled womanizer in the entire university campus, changed to calling me Ralph from that day. He was known to most students by his nickname, Ivory, which was short for irresponsible. His most celebrated conquest was a female undergraduate who seemed so inaccessible that the boys called her Unbreakable. Irie became interested in her and promised his friends to break her one day soon. Then one afternoon, we saw her enter his rooms. Our hall began to buzz with excitement as word went around that and we stood in a little groups all along the corridor waiting. Half an hour or so later, Irie came out, glistening with sweat, closed the door quietly behind them, and then held up a condom bloated with his disgusting seed. That was Irie for you, a real monster. I suppose I was somehow flattered by the notice of a man of such prowess had taken in Elsie's cry. When I confided in him later that Ralph was the name of the girl's proper boyfriend, he promptly changed to calling me Assistant Ralph, or if Elsie was around, simply AR. Despite this rather precipitous beginning, Elsie and I had become very good and steady friends. I can't pretend that I ever thought of marriage, but I must admit I did begin to feel a little jealous any time I found her reading and rereading the blue British air letter with the Red Queen and House of Parliament stamped on its back. Elsie was such a beautiful, happy girl, and she made no demands whatever. When I left the university, she was heartbroken, and so was I for that matter. We exchanged letters every week or 2 weeks at the most. I remember during the postal strike of 1963, when I didn't hear from her for a month, I nearly kicked the bucket, as my boy Peter would have said. Now she was working in a hospital about 12 miles outside Bori. And so we arranged that I should spend my next holidays in the capital and take the bus to her hospital every so often while she would be able to spend her days off in the city. That was why the minister's offer couldn't have come at a more opportune moment. I had, of course, one or two bachelor friends in the capital who would have no difficulty in putting me up, but they weren't likely to provide a guest room with all the amenities. For days after the minister's visit, I was still trying to puzzle out why he seemed so offended at his old nickname, MA minus opportunity. I don't know why I should have been so preoccupied with such unimportant trash, but it often happens to me like that. I get a hold of some pretty inane thought or a cheap tune I would ordinarily be ashamed to be caught whistling, like that radio jingle advertising an intestinal worm expeller, and I get stuck with it. When I first knew Mr. Nanga in 1948, he had seemed quite happy with his nickname. I suspect he had, in fact, invented it himself. Certainly, he enjoyed it. His name being M.A. Nanga, his fellow teachers simply called him fondly M.A. He answered minus opportunity, which he didn't have to do unless he liked it. Why then the present angry reaction? I finally decided that it stemmed from the same general anti-intellectual feeling in the country. In 1948, Mr. Nanga could admit, albeit lightheartedly, to a secret yearning for higher education. Yearning is what this says. Albeit lightheartedly, in 1948, Mr. Nanga could lightheartedly to a certain yearning for higher education. In 1964, he was valiantly proving that a man like him was better without it. Of course, he had not altogether persuaded himself, or else he would not have shown such excitement over the LLD arranged for him from some small backstreet college. And we're going to stop reading there for this tonight. We're going to pick up on chapter 3. But what do you think? What do you think? Anthony McPhail said European colonialism loosened up to get a tighter grip. They rule indirectly to maintain control. They absolutely do rule indirectly. Greetings, KW Don 7. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. They absolutely do loosen up control. They actually don't even really loosen up control. They just put a black face on white policy. So they make a black person enforce white rule. They manipulate some poor black person into thinking that they have control and that they have power, and they then uh and then they retain power, control, and they retain power, control, and domination indirectly. Oh, thank you so much. Moana Haguziki says he loved and that I managed the accents well and that I managed the accents well. I'm trying. 100% absolutely like Barack Obama. Exactly like a Barack Obama. And like any black leader you can think of that they did not assassinate. Every and they tell in America, they tell black people who's going to be the leader. They don't even allow us to pick or elect or select our leaders because we would definitely, I think, elect someone more revolutionary than an Al Sharpton or a Jesse Jackson, God rest his soul. Um, I think that we have to get to the point We have to get to the point where we are electing and selecting our own leaders. Anthony McPhail has decided to join us. Thank you so much for tuning in, Anthony. How are you tonight?
Doing fine, Major. That was a great reading. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I figured we needed something a little
Mhm.
conscious, but a little lighthearted because the next book
Uh,
is going to be heavy. I'm going to that Thistlewood guy. But Wanda Haguziki sent me some really excellent books. I want to thank him for that. This was his selection,
okay.
and these are some excellent texts.
Yeah, I was just wondering. Like I was in the chat matron, and I was like,
Mhm.
I asked Barner. I said, what did he think that Achebe would think of Nigeria today, or like of a Tinubu? You know what I'm saying? A character like that. And and also like in my mind, I was thinking also what would like Wole Soyinka think about it?
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Who's still alive? We know Achebe is in the ancestors now, but Wole Soyinka is still alive. But yeah, I wonder what are his thoughts on present day Nigeria now, in politics and the geopolitics and everything now. But yeah, that was a fantastic reading on Nathan. And yeah, it was incredible, man. I came in late because I was celebrating my birthday a little bit. And but I've been on for about like the last hour though. But yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you
and
for
that
spending your birthday with us.
yeah. And that book about that book about a man of the people. That was a great. I had it before. I lost it. I let somebody get it, and I lost it.
Mhm.
Man. I let somebody get it. I let somebody borrow it and never bought it back.
Mhm. Well, it's so much relevance to it, even to us in America and
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
Caribbean
Mm.
and on the continent. When you look at how we interact with the political machine and how our politicians throw this flashiness in our faces and make us think that they are on our side, and there are small trivial things that we will say, oh, he's a man of the people, he's someone that is on our side, and really and truly, when you look at the inner workings of their policies and the politics and the things that they actually uphold, they're not on our side.
All I can think about. That's why I put it in the chat. All I can think about was Barack Obama.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I was wondering what you thought about that. That's what I
Yeah,
thought about Barack
absolutely.
Obama.
Yeah, I'm not ashamed to admit that I didn't know a lot about Barack Obama when he was
Uh,
originally elected. And
uh,
I was impressed with the fact that as a country, we
a lot of us
elected a
were.
black man
Yeah,
because it
we
was
all
like,
were.
now that they crashed the economy and now that
Uh,
everything's gone to shit, they're gonna give it to a black man.
uh,
And
and then he
I
gonna do
thought he would
something.
be assassinated. I thought he would be assassinated while in office.
Uh,
And when they didn't do that, that
uh,
opened my eyes as to the type
yeah,
of policy that he
yeah,
actually would uphold.
yeah. It was. I mean, it was. Matron. It was classic. It goes to show how, like, we as black people. Remember, our sister Barbara Sines will always say, "Black people still don't get it." You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? And it's like while we was going on emotion, we got a black matron. I was one of the leading cheerleaders when
Hmm.
it happened. If you know me now, how I am now, you say, I know Anthony didn't do that. Yes, I did. You know what I'm saying? I was one of the leading cheerleaders. Oh man, I was at work telling white folks, we free. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We finally free. I say it's all now. We in power now. And I got a reality check real fast. But I say
Hmm.
that's why I was saying, matron, white folks loosen up to get a tighter grip. We gonna lay there and slip this Negro, this half Negro, whatever you want to call him, and let him say a couple of things and have all us. You know how we was all smiling and crying and everything and thinking, oh Lord, it's a change gonna come. Well, you know what? All he did was he was the same thing. White folks got smart. They did what they did in South Africa.
Yeah.
The white power structure changed clothes. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? You know,
And now we
Negroes
got
say,
Trump because
yeah,
we have a
uh,
white backlash.
yeah, and look here, and this is what I'm saying, Major. It was set up like that. We gonna give him Barack Obama, and we gonna use him. He gonna do what we want him to do. But you know what? We gonna have these other group of white people so mad that a nigga is in office. You know what I'm saying? That guess
Yeah.
what? At the next president's inauguration, we gonna elect a straight up, obvious white supremacist. All of them white supremacists. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
white racist. You know what I'm saying? But we gonna have one that ain't scared to say it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They knew exactly what they doing. There was a plan.
Yeah.
It was a plan to sit Barack Obama up there, and then okay, guess what? Now we finna come with the white nationalists now that they hate, even though this Negro didn't do nothing for nobody but white people. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a plan though, and we bought into it, and because Barack Obama was white power and blackface.
Yeah. He absolutely was. And Kamala would have been white power and blackface as well. But I think it would have, the social safety nets would not have gone away so quickly. And that is what that was what my concern was, because the most vulnerable of us are now at high risk because we didn't elect the Kamala. But she wasn't going to get in anyway because they weren't going to elect a woman. They had a problem with Hillary, so they definitely weren't going to
Yeah,
elect
so
a
you don't want
woman
to
of
like a
color.
woman of color. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Greetings, Tawana
Hey,
Haguziki. Thank
hey,
you
what's
so
up,
much
Warner?
for tuning in.
Hey, what's up, guys? She might get elected next time. What y'all think about that? She might get elected. You know, if she runs again, she might get elected. But
You
when
know,
go
I
ahead,
don't
sister.
know if she'll get elected again. I think that I don't know if they're going to put that kind of money behind her again. You know, but maybe, who knows?
Yeah,
I think
when I
Newsom.
go ahead, sister. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say Gavin Newsom might have a chance if he can keep his foot out of his mouth.
When I saw Barack Obama elected, you know, I was happy. I was happy when I first saw him. But for me personally, I know my brothers in America was witnessing something great in terms of leadership and never experiencing a black face in leadership and that kind of leadership position before. So I would, you know, for me personally, I was happy, but I was like looking at it and I'm watching a rerun. I've watched men take on very powerful positions and just betray the people completely. So I'm like, he may talk good, he can dance good, he gonna do all, he play basketball, do all the things that black folks like, you know, appear to like. But at the end of the day, you know, he's gonna pay his dues to his paymasters, the people who put him in office. I'm watching him and I'm saying, well, I couldn't have been so disappointed because I've seen it before. We've elected prime ministers who've done the exact same thing. The exact same thing. You know, so I really wasn't so disappointed the fact that he really didn't do nothing for black people because I've seen it before. You know, I've seen it before. You know,
Hey,
so I go ahead, brother.
no, go ahead, Warner. Finish your point. I want to say something after you. Major, can I say something after him?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so but as far as Monitor People, I mean the book it parallels the politics like Matron was saying, like well, a lot of different countries, black countries. But I'm listening to this book and I'm saying that so much different things I could point to in showing the similarities, you know, almost exact the same things that was occurring in I think in Nigeria. The same things was occurring here. The anti-intellectualism that you spoke about, the fact that they wanted to just print money. It's like they don't realize, well, you're gonna destroy your economy. You can't just do that. Yeah, it's like, oh, I understand the idea of Nigeria was walking a thin rope because you don't want so much outside influences to come in to turn your society into a little Britain. I understood that, but you can't be so backwards where you just want to say, okay, well, we're going to run a so-called quote unquote country, but we're going to run it through nepotism. We're not going to run it through merit. We're just going to have people in high office, in high positions. They may not know what the hell they're doing, but because they are subservient to the leadership, they should get this position. That's ridiculous. You're going to crash your economy. It's ridiculous. But it happens. It happens. I see it every day. So I think that you did a good reading and your analysis was very good as well. I want Anthony, well, I'll talk to him about that later. But I think you are the person to read this book because I think you give a very good analysis on what's going on. I really appreciate that. I'll leave it. Go ahead, Anthony.
Okay, Warner. Yeah, man. Great announcer, Warner. Well, hey, and just always, as I always say, first and foremost, no one can read like the Matron. You know what I'm saying? No one could read and break it down and make it plain to you where you can understand it like you. I mean, it's a joy to listen to the Matron read. I love her readings. Okay. That being said, what I was gonna say, Buana, okay, if you study, we have to study the history of Nigeria and how Nigeria was formed and everything. Now, I ain't gonna go that far back, with Lugo and them. But what I'm saying, one thing that was constant in Nigeria. Now, you had like the first independence leaders in 1960. We know you had from the time of Nnamdi Azikiwe and them, and the second brother, the one who got overthrown in '63. I mean, I keep his name was it's a Muslim brother from the north. But anyway, the constant in Nigeria was the military, the Nigerian military. The Nigerian military, and the Nigerian military was controlled by who? The British, by the West. You know what I'm saying? Hey, every time it was a coup d'etat or something, it was always from the military. You know what I'm saying? Because the military was controlled by them. And for a long time, they had this one white man, Matron. I know you may have seen it. Buana, I know you've seen it. You've seen programs like remember Ali Mazarai's The African,
Yes.
where
Yes.
it was this white man who you would see who was the trainer of the British military. I mean the Nigerian military.
Mm-hmm.
It was this white guy. I can't remember his name right now, but he was the man who was in control. He was the chief. He called the chief advisor. He was the chief advisor to the Nigerian military, but he was the British point man who was the one behind all of those military coups. You know what I'm saying? When somebody went off script and wanted to do something for the people, you know what I'm saying? Or wanted to do something on their own. What I'm saying? So when you just read, Achebe knew this. Achebe, Walter Shieka, they knew this about that. They knew how it go. I always go back to that book, Things Fall Apart.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that Matron? The one he had before they called Things Fall Apart. You know what I'm saying? So Chinwe Achebe was always up on that. He got he got a lecture that he had did before he passed. That he had did, and it's on YouTube, where he was talking about a lot of this stuff. But I'm saying, just look at Nigeria today. The reason why you have a Tinubu, the reason why you had a Goodluck Jonathan, the reason why you had these different guys who was in power, all of these guys are in the hand of the British. Nigeria has never been an independent country. It has always been in the hand of the British. That's why right now you can see with everything that's going on in West Africa now. Here go Nigeria get the U.S. the okay to put a military base up there near the Burkina Faso border.
Clowns.
Clowns.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolute traitors.
Yeah, exactly. And what I was going to say, I damn Major, I was running my mouth. I damn near forget. But what I was going to say was about, I was going to ask, okay, that's what I was going to say. When we was talking about Barack, and I'm going to say this and knock off. We was talking about Barack Obama and what and Major how we believed in, we temporarily let our guard down. And we had a lax of emotion. They said, and we got caught up in it, Major, me and you, Barack Obama. What I'm saying, but see, we seen this. This is how smart and intelligent that the white power structure is, the global white power structure, the one in America and all of, because they all stick together. We seen Barack Obama coming. They know what they was doing when they created Barack Obama. They said, we're going to do this later. But you know who they started off with? The first Barack Obama. And I remember I had this conversation on Bit of Medicine. Buana, remember me, you, Black Steel, Koku. I told you they started it off with Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was the first Barack Obama. Here we gonna go. We gonna get a Negro who been locked up 27 years, and he didn't have to be locked up that long because he was getting groomed after a period of time. Okay, we gonna bring him out. We gonna make him be the front man for the government. So we're gonna take the sanctions off South Africa. See, South Africa is of vital importance to the United States and to the West with their minerals and their location, their strategic location, or where they at down there at the end of Africa. From the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic, to No, all that, and then the space program, you had to factor all that in. It was no way in the hell they was gonna lose South Africa. Okay, so we gonna put this Negro in. He gonna come with this conciliatory message and everything. This we all united, we together. South Africa is for everybody who live here, and all that stuff. And, all of the stuff that he said. You know what I'm saying? Far from from the militancy that he had. Even his militancy was really margarine militant. No, he was always a militant integrationist. No, he was not a black. He was not a black revolutionary.
He was.
No, hey, he was a black. Look, he was never a black revolutionary. He was a militant integrationist because this man from the beginning was controlled by the South African Communist Party, which was some Jewish white folks. A man named Joe Slovo and his wife. They ran the South African Communist Party. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so he graduated from communism and they converted him. Hey, you got to leave that communism stuff alone. And you know what I'm saying? And you got to get with this program. So the West got him, groomed him. We're going to let you out of prison. You've been up 27. We're going to let you out of there, put you as the face of South Africa. And guess what? The world going to release the sanctions off of South Africa and we're going to have business as usual. White folks still run South Africa today. Right now today. And everything. One more thing, because I'm going to knock off and let you finish. Okay, so they groomed him. This was the acceptable, made him into the acceptable Negro who could be conciliatory for blacks and for whites. You know what I'm saying? It worked in South Africa, it could work in America. And he was the blueprint for the bringing of Barack Obama, and making Barack Obama president opened up the continent of Africa for further neo-colonialism, for colonialism. Okay, I'm believing right there, Matrix. Go ahead, Barnum.
No. I absolutely agree with that. I think that Nelson Mandela he betrayed his cause. With the ANC, he betrayed his. To be honest with you, we're having a real honest conversation. I think he betrayed his people. I don't really feel that way. But I would say this: I never was in prison for 27 years. You could imagine the psychological shit that the Du Bois was doing to him for them 27 years. They had all kind of shit. I don't know. They probably was doing all kind of things to this man. So he came out of prison a different kind of dude. Even though when he went in there, you're right, he was a militant integrationist. My question is this. What is the alternative? Because you could either, because we talking on a large scale now in terms of feeding people. You either could walk that line with Nelson Mandela, because they say South Africa is one of the wealthiest countries in Africa right now. Or you could do like Robert Mugabe or like Cuba and go the other way. Where in Cuba right now, America send their boats where they surround them and say, well, we're going to cut your oil off completely. Or if you, in the Caribbean, when the Caribbean leaders started to act out a script, like Grenada, you see what happened to Maurice Bishop. So it's like, we in a war either way. Because if we go the way of independence, true independence, our people could be very angry at us. They're going to want to kill us. Because they can say, well, we was eating very good when we was aligned with, because they don't understand, they don't have the sophistication to understand the politics. They're going to say, well, we was eating good. We had television. We was going to Miami every Saturday. And now we on our own, quote unquote, independent and free. Like the slave on a plantation. If you tell a slave about freedom is a responsibility. You actually have to do certain things yourself. You can't rely on the plantation system no more to feed you, to clothe you, to build your homes, to take care of their children. For some people, they would rather remain with the plantation system, because you are guaranteed 3 square meals a day. You're guaranteed certain things in the plantation system. With freedom, you have to do all these things for yourself. That scares a whole lot of people, brother. People who may not understand that men have to exist in this world to be free. That's just what it is.
Yeah. Okay, Barnum, check this out real quick. Okay, right now you made a statement. You said that South Africa, by being one of the wealthiest countries, richest countries in Africa. But look here. Okay, that's a true statement when you look at it. But look here, it ain't black people in South Africa though. When you look at it, it ain't them. Black people in South Africa are borderline on the poverty level. That's on the poverty level. Look here, the majority of black people in South Africa, they own no land, they don't have no houses of their own. I mean, the overwhelming majority. Look here, the economy is still controlled by the Europeans. You know what I'm saying? Everything in South Africa controlled, the mineral wealth, the natural resources, the gold mine, the mineral wealth is all controlled by Europeans. You'll say so that the GDP thing is a misleading thing. That's why they on the brink of revolution. That's why they have a problem now.
This,
You know
but Anthony, the South Africans, the whites in South Africa played a game. They played a very good game.
Yeah,
let me explain it.
Go ahead.
They gave some black people this idea of being middle class black people. If you come to our universities and get educated, we're gonna give you middle class jobs where you could live kind of like us, but not necessarily like us. You could have our lifestyles, but not necessarily have our wealth. They fool a whole lot of black people in South Africa with that dream, with that South African dream. If I just work hard enough, and if I educate myself, I'll be different from these so-called poor black people over here. I'll have accomplished myself and I've made it. This is what they fool the black South Africans into believing. So now they chasing that carrot rather than trying to chase the land and everything in it. You know what I mean?
You're 100% right. Hey, Major, you're 100% right. Major, let me say this real quick. Major, he 100% right. But you look at it, okay, what do black people in South Africa do that black people in America do the same thing? Because of our economic situation, because we ain't got shit, guess what? Black people in America do what? We blame black immigrants. Guess what black people in South Africa do? Blame Zimbabweans. You know what I'm saying? Blame Malawians. Blame people from neighboring black countries. It's the same thing. You know what I'm saying? But one thing I want to say this here finally, okay, this is what Russia did in the 17th, in the 18th, early 18th, during the time of Peter the Great. When Peter the Great became a Tsar of Russia, you know what he did, Juana? He did this here. He enacted ruthless legislation. Okay, he said that my country is backwards. He knew he was behind the Western Europeans, the French, the British, and all them, the Germans. He knew he was behind them. His country was backwards. So he said, I got to turn my country from a backwater. You know what he did? He said, I'm going to take my people to modernity, even if I have to drag them to it. That's what Peter the Great said. Even if I have to drag him to it, he would go out among his people. They know who he was. I don't know how, because he was about 6'7". But I'm saying he would go out among his people to hear his people talk. What I'm saying, the answer is what you was talking about. We got to lay there and even if we had to make our people do it. Matron, if we got to bust our people in the damn mouth to get their attention, that's what we got to do. I'll leave it right there.
Hold on, Anthony. Where you read that book, Peter the Great? I want to read that. Where you get that from? Where you read that? I want to read that book.
No, I just read a book about Tsar Peter the Great of Russia.
What's the name of the book?
I found it in the library. I was a teenager. I was about 19 or 20.
Oh, okay. No sweat. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
It was just a biography for Peter the Great.
I was just going to say that one of the things that happens is that as they give us these trinkets, we lose our race consciousness. It's very easy to appeal to the lower classes of people, to explain to them you don't have anything and it's their fault, to explain to them that they have to have a level of racial cohesiveness, and to take away from them that dream. We have to begin banging on the drum that says white is an inclusionary status to the exclusion of African or to the exclusion of Black, because you can be white as long as you're not Black. And being Black is the only way to amass power for the group. We have a sense of group togetherness and group cohesion. We come to these places online because we want to be together. We come to these places online because we recognize that we have a shared destiny in this world. What happens is that we don't maintain that because they give some of us a few trinkets. And we don't maintain that because we feel like, well, they giving us a break. They did the same thing, like you said, in South Africa that they did to the American Black man and woman. They give them this illusion of inclusion in their economy. That when wealth, it has been documented that Black wealth and white wealth is entirely different. They are on different scales. So when a black man gets $100,000, they think they're doing something. When for white people, that's just the entry point. Like even when you file your taxes, they tell you these things when they break down the tax brackets and they talk to you about how much of a credit you'll get based on the fact that you're poor. One of the things that Joe Biden did when they gave, and what Donald Trump did when they gave us those checks, is that they explained to us that if you're not making $175,000 a year in America, you're poor. And we have to remind people of that, because somebody making $50,000 to $100,000 a year thinks that they're middle class. And there's this skewed understanding of middle class and working class. You can be a $200,000 a year person, but you're still working class because you go out and work every day for that money. You can be a person that makes $90,000 a year, but because you now have the leisure of time given back to you because it's all passive income, you are now middle class. And we have to make those distinctions between what is and what isn't. And we have to stop allowing our people to be led off by the nose with these trinkets and this illusion of inclusion.
Matron, you said that if you making less than $100,000 or $100,000, are you poor? That's what they say. God,
that's what they say. That's what they say. When you really look at the numbers and how they break down things like incomes and tax credits. Yeah. Yeah. You have to be making $100,000 a year. Now, that's not to say that you can't live a decent life. That's not to say that you're impoverished. Because my brother is one of them $100,000 a year people. I'm not, but my brother is one of them $100,000 a year or more people. But he works 80 hours a week.
Oh,
He
goodness.
you know what I'm saying?
Hey,
So he's
Major, what if you got $100,000 college student, 200,000 student loans?
You know what I'm saying? So we have to, we have these discussions in my family all the time, especially since my mom passed away, that, there's a race consciousness that has to be able to break through to people that think they're making money in this situation. Because the reality is that they're not. They're in a rat race. They don't have an opportunity to actually sit back and think. They're just caught up in a cycle of working, and then they might take a break. They might be able to take 2 weeks off, or they might be able to take a week off or 3 days off, or go somewhere fancy. But they're not doing anything to build up the collective. So yeah, there's a level of race consciousness, I think, that exists with the lower classes of people that you can break through, that doesn't exist with the middle class, because the middle class thinks that they're on their way to breaking through the color barrier. Oh, I make so much money, it doesn't matter. Color don't matter. The only color that matters is green. It's the biggest lie they ever sold the black man, because green
I remember when sorry for interrupting, Matron. I remember when Barack Obama was elected, and the pundits were saying that we living in a post-racial society. Could you imagine such a thing? You remember when they were saying we living in a post-racial society?
Yeah, I remember them saying that, and I remember thinking to myself at that time that this is America. There's no way we can even get to a post-racial society until they try to make amends for the sins that they have committed against their Black population. And the idea that we're living in a post-racial society is a myth, like the melting pot myth that they try to put on people and make them think that this is anything other than white hegemonic society. They gave the economy to Obama because they had messed it up complete and totally. And they were like, we need to put a different face on where this goes, because if it all burns down, we don't want to be responsible. We want to be able for the history books to say that it was a Black man that did it.
I have a question for you. Matron. Last question, because I know you have to go. You said that your brother was one of these 6-figure people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you? How many of y'all is you have a bunch of brothers and sisters?
No, as they're just three. We're three.
How do you all get together and like in terms of strategizing? Because I know you say your mother passed. Condolences, by the way. I know you was taking care of her for a while.
Hmm.
How do you all get together in terms of strategizing to make sure, in terms of now and the next generation, it'll be okay? To keep on that legacy going. How do you all get together in terms
One of
of
the
money
first things,
arrangements?
yeah, one of the first things we did was we put together a family trust, and we put my mom's house inside of the trust. And we come together and everybody gives up to $500 or what they can, because not everybody is at that level, so that we can buy other properties and put them in the trust. We also talk about training programs for the next generation, because I don't have biological children. My sister is the only one that had children, but she had three. So we acknowledge that that is our next generation. That's our replacement value for the next generation. And we invest in them in different programs and different opportunities so that they have that extra edge. And we give them a Black first and a Black nationalist mindset. Now, my niece, when she was 7, she was going to a white school because her mom didn't have a race consciousness. And my niece was like, Titi, are you racist? And I said, no, I'm not racist. You could probably call me prejudiced, but I'm not racist. But these are the things that happen, and this is why I don't trust them. And so I talked to her about those things so she understands that it's not about being racist, because we're not in a position of power to have to impact them financially, socially, or anything else. But you can be cautious and prejudiced against them because of what they did, because they don't understand and acknowledge. But we have a family trust, and we continue to donate. um we continue to contribute money to that trust so that we have money to invest collectively. And then when we collectively invest, we each get a portion of that money back.
Okay,
You know,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah. You're welcome.
Hey, Matron, could you expand a little bit on how that go right there? Like that process go a little bit for us who don't know about that?
We hired a lawyer. We hired a lawyer. The first thing you do is you find a lawyer that deals in real estate trusts. Really, and we hired an attorney to handle everything. And the only thing I can say that we did, when they talk about putting it in a trust and things like that, the deed of your house isn't in one person's name. The deed of your house goes into the name of the trust. So ours is Squire Family Real Estate. And then the beneficiaries on there are listed as me, my brother, my sister, my niece, and my 2 nephews are successors in interest. So they are the ones that as we pass away, they will inherit their portion or that share of the trust based on which person has passed away. And then as far as investing, like I either cash app him the money that I have, or he will call us and tell us that it's time, and we send him money, and he invests that money back into an account that draws interest. And we did that through, I forget, I will answer that question for you next time I come live, but I forgot what the name of the company is. But that's all. I mean, it's not a complicated process. It's just that it takes away some of the benefits that you might get. You have to make sure that your trust files their taxes annually, so that your tax information lines up, because somebody is still paying for the house, and somebody still needs to get that money. That money still needs to continue to circulate within the trust. So like last year when we got the tax return, it came back and it went 3 ways, instead of just going back to the one person that's paying the mortgage on the house.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to know, Major, because I got a friend in a house right across the street from me. And like it was a brother and a sister, and it was something like that. Well, anyway, they went through all kind of mess. Like who owned that, who have controlling interest or whatever stuff like that, and they've been going through all kind of mess. That's why I want to see, could you break it down a little bit further and tell us, how the process go and where, and or how it could be where, that kind of thing don't happen. You know what I'm saying?
You have to write into your trust that every person is, like, for us is 33 1/3%. That is our equitable interest in the house, is at 33 1/3%. You can't just say, oh, it's these people, because then you'll have problems. You have to write the percentages into the documents. So if it's 3 people, it's 33 1/3%. If it's 2 people, it's a 50-50. If it's 4 people, it's 25%. But you have to write that into the documents.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification, Matron.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
matron, the grandchildren don't have the same kind of interest, though. I mean,
No.
Okay.
No, theirs is an inheritable interest. So once a person dies, then the documents will be filed. So our wills say, so we all drew up wills as well. And like my will says that my niece Tania gets my 33 1/3% interest in the property. So that she doesn't have to, like, because like in Michigan, I live in Michigan, Metro Detroit. And if you pass a house down to somebody that's not a first line descendant, so mother, brother, sister, so like a child or a sister or a spouse, they can uncap the taxes. And so that opens them up for liability. And that means that, like, whereas my taxes are about $5,000 a year, they can go up as high as $9,000 a year to adjust for what is market rate on the property. So
you said something interesting, and I want to tell the brothers and sisters, because my parents didn't do it. Leave a will. A will is important, especially when you have assets that you want people to receive. Always leave a will. Anthony, you getting up there? Just write a will, brother. Just write a will. And for all the brothers and sisters who listening, I know Black people think that they're gonna live forever. It's important to write wills in terms of where you want your assets to go, because if you don't leave a will, especially with sisters and brothers, sometimes it turns into a shit show. It didn't happen to us, my brothers and sisters, kind of like more laid back, but I see it happen all the time. So just consider getting a will done if you have a substantial amount of assets, so it won't turn into a shit show. If you understand what I'm meaning.
Yeah, exactly. That's what
absolutely
happened.
agree.
That's what I was asking about it. But that's what exactly happened to my friends.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And then the state can get involved and take assets if you don't have a will. Not so, like in Michigan, they have this thing where they set aside $15,000 of any debt that you have. Doesn't have to be repaid, but it has to go to one or more creditors. But you can't say, oh, I want you to take $15,000 off the price of the house. But like if you have credit card debt, consumer debt, things like that, and it's $15,000 or less, you can say we don't want to pay that, and they can't come after the estate, and you can still keep the asset. So one of the things that you have to be mindful of is, what are the inheritance rules? Who can inherit what in your state? Because like I said, my equitable interest goes first to my sister, then over to my niece, so that they don't have to, so that they can't uncap the taxes. My mom had 401ks and things like that. My mother passed without a will. And we agreed that everything was just going to be split equally. We were going to put the house in the trust. I was going to continue to live in the house and pay the mortgage. I would get a third of the proceeds back from the taxes. And that if we ever decided to sell the house, I get 80% of the sale price, because I'm the one that paid the mortgage off. And then they would share the other 20%. But that I also agreed that I would buy another house, because that's the next step, because the objective is to never be houseless in this society. Because if you lose your house, you lose access to stability in this world, because you don't have a place that you're grounded to. So that's how we set it up. That's what my will says. That's how we listed it all out. But there are just the different things you have to think about when you think about excuse me, going into this particular endeavor, you know, and you have to know that your siblings and you are on the same page. You know, you can't let grief or greed overtake you. You know.
Well, it's a good thing that you had a good relationship with your sisters and brothers. That's not always the case, man. I gotta tell you, especially when greed comes in, as you said. But it's a good thing that you all have and this is the reason why I tell the brothers and sisters, I don't try to engage in trivialities, especially when we could talk it out, you know. But I think that Black people should develop mature relationships where we see the bigger picture. You know, sure, we don't always agree. Families don't always agree, but the bigger picture is your parents worked for years and years and years to create and establish something for you all. And if they was alive, they would want you all to at least share in their efforts equally if they was around, you know, and if they was fair minded. So I tell the brothers them on a different kind of level to try to see the bigger picture. Of course, we ain't gonna always agree, but the bigger picture is us coming together and becoming stronger because of it. You know, and I think that that's very important. But that's really all I wanted to say, Matron. Thank you so much for the advice. Thank you for the readings. Like I say, this is one of my favorite books, man. So I'm gonna be here next time, you know, front and center to listen to the other readings. Anthony, happy birthday, brother. You have me drinking vodka on a Tuesday night, but happy birthday, brother. You're only 59 one time in your life. Peace out.
Hey, thank you, man. Yeah, Matron, could I just say this
Yes,
before closing? I want to ask you because
absolutely.
yeah, Matron, I know like right now across the country, I guess across this country, but I know particularly across the southern part of the country where we live in, where a majority of us live in. I know in Atlanta we had this housing crisis thing going on. You know
Hmm.
what I'm saying? As far as like the gentrification and stuff like that.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And I can remember, and I'm thinking, I know you probably remember, Matron. It was probably, I can remember it might have been about 20 years ago. But I know it was a program that I seen on PBS, on the public channel, and it was about the housing thing in Detroit. And it was
Hmm.
featuring, it was this sister's light skin. She passed now because she had, no, he had health things. But it was a struggle thing that she was going through against the city and the state, whatever, about her house. You know, and I think it was something about like maybe like the mother not passing down a will or something. I can't remember. It been so long ago, but it was on PBS. It was about because in Detroit they had this thing where a lot of this was in the 80s and 90s where had a lot of houses, a lot of burnt out houses or abandoned houses and stuff in the Detroit
Yeah.
in that area. And it
Yeah.
was a program. It was about this housing thing, about gentrification, about and people getting their houses taken, because of for paperwork and stuff like that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I mean, do you think you remember what I'm talking about? That documentary that came out on PBS back then, probably like in the early '90s,
Part of it, I remember that a lot of people did
because
not.
because they was also talking about the water thing, how they was cutting off people water and stuff. It's
Yeah.
really I was trying to get people's properties.
Yeah, they are trying to
Uh,
take people's properties.
yeah.
They're still
Uh,
doing those types of things.
yes, ma'am.
Where they say you don't have your paperwork filed, or like the house that your parents may have lived in or your grandma lived in, you never went to file the deed correctly, and then you don't know anything about filing taxes. These are things we need to talk to our children about, like especially with a house that's paid for, because a lot of those properties were paid for, paid off houses that have a lot of equity in them, but they were in urban areas. And to take their properties, what they would do is they increased property taxes, and then they would send out these notices, and they didn't have any programs to help supplement the fact that these people didn't know that they needed to pay property taxes, because we don't own houses, we continue to rent the land. over and over and over again. That's why we pay property taxes every year. And a lot of times people didn't know that they were even in a position where they had anything that they were supposed to pay, and they would get their houses taken, or they would put a lien on their house for the water bill, not because people didn't know they had to pay water bills, but because water had become so expensive when they started the Great Lakes Water Authority. So they now have put other programs and safety nets in place, and they sued the city to get the equity back from these houses that got taken from these people, but they lost their family home. So yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, exactly, Major. I mean, because I never did forget that. 'Cause, I mean, my mom, our family, we looked at that. We sat down and watched that program, and because we were saying, because this was a lot of some of the same. It was beginning to happen down here, and like they're doing it now, where you had these people buying houses, whatever, position they in, and then we beginning to have like a bad water thing down here too. You know what I'm saying? It is political thing, like they're doing in Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Really a land grab and stuff. But I remember that show, and I was wondering when we first started talking. I said, I wonder if Major remember that program. But
Yeah,
yes,
I
ma'am.
remember.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
remember, and I remember that happened to quite a few people that I know, where their houses got taken.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
like now, because so it started in like the late 90s. They only went back to people impacted to the like 2013. So if they did that to your house from 2013 until now, you can go back and get your equity. But if it was before 2013, if it was during the height of that or during the mortgage crisis, you can't go back and get the money, because they're like, the money is gone. It's just your gift to the state.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. That's what I was talking about, ma'am. Yeah, I'm glad you remember that. Yeah, but see, because I mean, that same thing going on right now. It's going on right now. And it's beginning to kind of like take foot here in Shreveport, where I live at.
Yeah, and they target areas. You know what I'm saying? They target especially areas that have access to water. They target areas, whether that water is water you can drink or whether that water is water that can be traveled upon. They target Black areas that have access to water because that is where the profits are for them. There aren't a lot of Black people in landlocked areas. There are a lot of Black people near waterways. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have a lot of Black people in Montana and, the Dakotas and things like that. You got Black people in Mississippi and in Louisiana and Michigan and New York. And they target those areas because they want access to the land so that they can transport their goods into and out of the area, and so that they can have control of the water that is a natural resource, so that they can control your movements and behaviors.
Yeah, 100%. Because we right there with Cross Lake. It's like the biggest man-made lake in the South. In the southern United States, Cross Lake, right here in Shreveport, like the
Yeah.
biggest or the second biggest. Yeah.
Yeah. So, these are the types of things we have to think about. So, when we are looking at how we can strategize, the first thing you do is build a strong Black family or network of Black people that you are connected to and aligned with. People that understand that this is not just about class, because our issues are not class-based issues, because they treat all of us the same no matter how much money we make. And then you can begin to align things like your resources together so that you're able to come together to so that you're able to come together and gain a leverage in this society that they don't usually attribute to Black people. White people been doing this for years. Another thing that a lot of Black people have stopped doing, and Koku has mentioned this before, is that we don't do life insurance anymore. I don't know why we stopped doing life insurance, except for the fact that there were so many claims that were getting denied based on how so many of us were dying. but we don't do life insurance anymore. And life insurance is how a lot of white people transfer wealth to the next generation. $100,000 policy costs you $100 a month. That's a pinch, but it's not a huge pinch, especially to make sure that the next generation has something to stand on. And you can take that life insurance policy that's $100,000 and you can put that into a trust, and you can name the people that you want as beneficiaries so that they will just get the money and not have to worry about any tax implications, because the trust takes care of the taxes. So if you have people that you want to benefit from your life and things like that, get a life insurance policy, because that's the one thing we all have to do one day, is move on to the next plane. Each and every one of us. Life insurance policies and wills are things that we need to reinforce in our community.
Absolutely.
But I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. The forecast says prejudice doesn't mean to prejudge. You are not prejudging. Plus, our humanity won't let us be racist anyway. We love everybody. We have this desire to show that we have this desire to be shown as the moral compass, because we have been propagandized to think that we are the moral compass of a country. And we have to wash away that thought and let this country stand on its merits for itself. What you do privately and how you handle those interpersonal relationships that you cultivate is your business. But it is not your job to be the moral compass and grounding point for a movement, a people other than your own, or a nation. Let this country burn the way that it burns based on its deeds and actions. So we have to get to the point where we recognize that it's not our job to be their moral guide and moral compass. It's our guide to be the example for our selected group and for our family. And those are the people that we have a first duty and obligation to. It's not our job to make a murderer or a murderess feel comforted by the fact that we have forgiven them and moved on. It's not our job to say, oh, we forgive you and we're going to forget this act or action. There are people groups that say never forget, and they remind themselves, and they do rituals to remind themselves of the different things that have happened to them. And we need to capture the essence of understanding that we need to pass on to our future generations the essence of what has happened to us in all of its full and gory details. Because if not, we're setting them up for failure. Why that teacher don't like me? That teacher don't like you because they have a knowledge and an understanding of your history that you don't. And when they see your beautiful black bright light shining, it reminds them that they are no longer in control and have power over you like they once did. And they resent that. But anyway, I want to thank Bwana Haguziki, Anthony McPhail, The Forecast, KW Don 7, Sister Raw, and everyone else that was listening tonight. Bwana Haguziki says that his mother did that exact thing, and he didn't even know she had money until the insurance people called him after she died. You know, I want to thank you, Bwana Haguziki, for sharing with us your life and your legacy and what your mother has done for you. And thank you, Anthony McPhail, for being here and sharing your birthday with us. I will be back on Thursday to continue reading this text. Do you guys like it when I read one text continuously through until the end? Or do you like it when I read two different books at one time? Let me know. What do you think?
I love it, baby. I love the one at a time.
Okay.
And thank you for allowing me on the show, Matron. And I like the mess to burn America up.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like America to burn America up because it is self-destructive. And one of the things that we can see even in popular media is that the white groups or the white integrated groups are turning on themselves because we are not participating in their politics. So as Black people, when we stay away from their politics and their policies, they turn on themselves. That's what they did in Europe, and that's what they do here in America. They turn on themselves because we're no longer a target. We are staying home. We are building our families. We are building our businesses and our hustles. We are doing our self-care and our mindfulness. We are centering ourselves and putting ourselves in a position where we can be powerful as a group, as a collective. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you on Thursday, and we'll continue our reading of A Man of His People. Peace, guys.